Hi everybody. This week we're going to be looking at John chapter 10 verses 1 to 6 and then 11 and 12. So last week we were looking at Jesus saying I am the bread of life and what that meant, and today we're going to be looking at another one of Jesus' I am sayings, and this one is I am the good shepherd. So I'm going to read it to you. I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate but climbs in some other way is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. And later on in verse 11, I am the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And in 14, I am the good shepherd, I know my sheep and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I will lay down my life for the sheep. So lots about sheep. Have a look. I've built this pen here out of Lego. Now, in Jesus' day, there were lots of shepherds and loads of sheep around, and that's why he used these stories, because the people would understand what he was talking about, because it was their way of life. Now, in those days, there were obviously loads of flocks of sheep, and they used to have these big sheep pens or folds, and at the end of the day, all the shepherds would bring their sheep and lead them in to the fold, and then they'd go and have a sleep or what have you, and they would leave a gatekeeper to guard the sheep and make sure they were safe all night and keep them away from wild animals, something that might attack them, or people stealing them, because you might get a robber that might come round and have to climb over the wall to steal a sheep. And what would happen is the shepherds would come back in the next morning, and they would all queue up, the gatekeeper would come out the way, and they would call their sheep. Now, there were lots of different flocks of sheep in these pens, and the shepherd would call his sheep, I don't know how, whistle, call, or however they did it in those days, and the sheep would recognise his voice and they would all follow him out, and they would take them out. And then the next shepherd would come. If the shepherd called out sheep that were from another flock, they wouldn't follow him. They would run away from him because they wouldn't know his voice. So Jesus was using this analogy to say that really, he is the good shepherd. He's the good shepherd. He's also the gatekeeper. So he protects the sheep, which is us Christians, from danger, from being stolen away, because the robber that might try and come over the wall is really another word for the devil, or people that might lead the sheep astray. And what the devil wants is to have control over people, and he's evil. And Jesus protects us from the devil. Also, Jesus looks after us and he leads us. And if we follow him, he calls us by name and we choose to follow him. Now, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about 3 people's voices that you might recognise. So close your eyes and think about that. Somebody really familiar. Would you recognise Jesus' voice calling you? How would you learn to recognise Jesus' voice? Well, you could do that by talking to Jesus and spending time with him, reading the Bible and talking to other Christian friends. And over time, you will learn to recognise Jesus' voice and decide whether you want to follow his voice. We were looking today, earlier in another video, you'll see I talked to 2 shepherds. Keith the shepherd was saying that it's a full-time job and he has to look after the sheep and feed them, look after them when they're sick, make sure they're safe, build a nice sheepfold for them. And he was saying he could never have a holiday or take a day off because it was such hard work. And he had 2,000 sheep at one point. Well, think how many of us, how many sheep Jesus has. Us Christians, there's hundreds and thousands and millions or what have you, and he knows us all and he calls us all by name. So we need to practice listening out for his voice. Now, we have different sheep activities you could do today. You could make a sheep card with some painty fingerprints, and you could send it to somebody and say, I don't know, somebody who's self-isolating, saying you're missing them badly or something. Also, we have sheep cakes that we've made using marshmallow. You can cut out of some black icing and put a little head on it, but we couldn't find any icing or ready-made icing in the shops at all. So we just had the marshmallows, but they tasted nice. You could make a sheep pom-pom, which I will try and attach the Pinterest for that, but basically you make that with wool that you wind around your hand and then cut the edges, but I'll see if I can find a link for that. That's quite good fun. Also, a nice prayer activity you could do as a family. You could cut out loads of sheep, and I made this that says, Jesus loves me like a shepherd looks after his sheep. And I've put everybody's names from our kids club on there so that when I pray I can remember you all. And you could do this for your family, or you could think of different friends and you could make a nice sheep scene and you could pray for them. So yeah, have a good week everyone. Bye.